You may be familiar, about 18 months ago, the Federal Reserve kicked off a payment system improvement initiative, and a key focus of our improvement efforts was on enhancing the speed of payments in the U.S. and really focusing on bringing real-time, faster payments to the U.S. market. And our approach to doing that was really just to facilitate the industry collaboration needed to do so. And we did that by establishing a faster payments task force. This outlines the task force mission and objectives, and really we've charged them with identifying and assessing effective approaches for faster payments in the U.S. And that encompasses, bringing all the diverse stakeholder views to the table to help define what effective looks like, looking at potential possible solutions in the marketplace, and then also considering what opportunities, issues, barriers, obstacles will the industry need to collaborate around to pave the way for successful implementation. So that's the work the task force has been about. They've been in existence for just over a year, about 15 months now, and we've got about 300 industry folks participating as members of the task force. It's one of our highest priorities was ensuring that we had diversity of thought and a variety of stakeholders at the table. So if you look at the membership of the task force, those 300 people come from emerging fintech space. We've got banks and credit unions of all sizes. We've got businesses and merchants, consumer interest groups, and some of the drivers of technology that enable banks and lots of other players like FIS. So a very diverse group of people working on the issue. Folks often ask, and there's a lot of confusion about what the task force is trying to do. And I think it's easy for folks to jump to the conclusion that the task force is choosing the faster payment system for the U.S. And that isn't at all what the task force is about. This sentence tries to kind of capture the essence, the purpose of the task force. And they're really accelerating and enhancing the implementation of faster payments in the U.S. They're doing that in a number of ways. I noted before the focus on coming up with a collective definition of what's needed in a future payment system here. And the task force spent their first 6 months of work focused on that, and in early February released the faster payments effectiveness criteria. So 36 criteria that describe the kinds of security features, the attributes of speed, of accessibility, usability, what kind of governance model, regulation, all of those things would be ideal for a faster payment system in the US. 36 criteria voted on by 300, developed, 6 iterations we went through with 300 people editing and commenting, ultimately to vote on with 97% of the task force members voting to approve these. And they felt, even at that point, that document itself might be the most valuable thing they would produce for the industry. And it's really seen as something that innovators, buyers, providers can all use as guidance for what should we be developing to, what should we as users of the system be looking for. And so if you haven't seen it, it is published, and it's a really fabulous document that will be a great resource to people in the industry. They also hosted a capability showcase where they said, hey, there's a lot of great innovation going on in the marketplace. Let's showcase and shine the light on some of the pieces, parts, and things that are coming to market or capabilities people are developing that could be a part of a future payments, faster payment system. And so there's, again, on the website, anyone and everyone was invited to produce 7-minute videos, provide a profile of their capabilities, that could support real-time payments. And that also was released in January and is out there. I think there's somewhere on the order of 35, 45. It's been growing over time, but providers who have showcased their capabilities there. So those were a couple of the building blocks of the task force that led to the next phase of their work, which is looking at solutions and evaluating solutions against the 36 effectiveness criteria. In April, task force members were invited to submit proposals for assessment, and the task force received more than 20 solution proposals, and those are in the process of being assessed right now. The task force felt it was important to have, really an independent body looking at and doing the assessment, a panel of experts per se who could really consistently and fairly apply the criteria and look at different solutions. And so the Federal Reserve, on behalf of the task force, contracted with McKinsey & Company to conduct the qualified independent assessment, is how it's dubbed. So they have been looking at and assessing those 20-some proposals against the criteria all summer, and we are getting very close to the point at which all of the proposers who wish to continue into the next phase of the work will release their proposals and the assessments to the full task force membership for them to see all the solutions that have come forward, to review McKinsey's assessment of those solutions, and to provide their own commentary. Part of the real value to proposers in participating in this is the opportunity to have 500 folks from the industry give them feedback and suggestions for how could they make their solution more effective, design it to better meet the needs of various constituents. So that part of the process will happen between October and December this year. And all of that body of work, the proposals, the assessments, the task force commentary, will be packaged and released to the full industry by the middle of next year. Now, the one thing the task force felt was important is, they said it's great to look at these solutions that might come to market, assess them, to give people just visibility into how effective these various alternatives are. But even more important, the task force wanted to drive industry action. And so perhaps the most important part of their final report will be their recommendations for industry next steps. They are looking at a host of what they think could be challenges and opportunities and exploring those issues. And so they're doing some of that foundational work now. They're going to expand upon it once they see the proposals that might come to market. But they're looking at issues like interoperability. Assuming, given our free market, that multiple solutions and methods for achieving this kind of capability will come to market, should we as an industry be grappling with interoperability and how we can be proactive in making sure that we don't end up with a lot of closed-loop systems, but we can achieve ubiquity and interoperability? They're looking at governance. They're looking at standards. They're talking about security. Are there unique security issues or challenges that the industry might face with real-time payments? And how can we proactively think about those and collaborate to solve them? So that challenges and opportunities work is going on now. That'll continue into early in the year and really be the foundation for what they will recommend in terms of the industry and various players in the industry taking the next steps to pave the way for successful implementation. So that's where we're at. I will, before I turn it over to Bob, I will just note that participation in the task force continues to be open to people who want to join and participate if your organization isn't yet involved. September would be a really great time to sign up because October 1, task force members will get to see all of those proposals. And there's a lot of benefit, one, to us to having you and lots of people involved in that, but to your organization too, as you think and plan and think about innovation and where you might take your payments business. this gives you a bit of, a 6-9 month leg up in terms of seeing the kinds of ideas and things that are in development in the real-time space in the US. So a pitch, please go out to the website if you aren't involved and think you might like to get involved at this point. So let me turn it over to Bob to talk about FIS and their experience in the real-time space.
I know this is a repeat performance, but this is my first time presenting here, as someone else was in this role last year. I'll talk a little bit about FIS and a little bit about the Faster Payments Initiative. It's a really exciting time. If it's been a year since this conference and you haven't seen or heard a lot of the noise in the industry, then you probably haven't been very tuned into the industry, right? There's been a ton of announcements, partnerships, new things that are happening, and so while there is a timeline that we're working on as participation in this exercise, there's also a real timeline in the world that we're answering to in the free market, right? The competitive timeline with both some of our partners, some of our competitors, and certainly for the clients we support. For any of you who are not familiar with FIS, we provide financial software and payments software, specifically in the payments division that I manage, for about 14,000 financial institutions around the world, which would include about 130 different countries. And so Faster Payments is a global initiative for us, more so than just a domestic one. And we've been doing work in the Faster Payments space in one form or another around the globe for many different countries. So the real question is what's next, right? And so as we look at where we are in the evolution of what's happening, I'm a product guy, so I start backwards instead of going forwards. I start back with the consumer. What are we going to change in the world? And then what's the ROI on that change going to bring? And then, how do we get there? So all of the initiative to build a faster payments network to make sure that the access to funds, real-time money transfer is available, all of that is great for behind the scenes. In the front, you need something to happen for someone that means something to them, makes it easier, right? To move money, whether that's outbound remittance, international, whether it's B2B, P2P, all of the different use cases. FIS has identified about 25 or 30 different use cases that have a potential ROI to businesses. Some of those are direct, lower cost, more efficiency, more operational ease, those type of things. Some are indirect, freeing up capital, allowing money to move differently behind the scenes, opening up different ways to manage the capital from the banking perspective, or even from some of the businesses that in many cases are not small businesses, but extremely large businesses, right? Moving settlement funds and things like that in real time can dramatically change the way in an open market businesses move dollars and report quarterly earnings and those type of things. So we see a lot of far-reaching implications on the faster payment space. And so as you see these 5 bullets here, obviously use case identification and development, that's where the profitability comes. So any nonprofits in the room? All right, good. Then we're all talking the same language, right? Doesn't matter if you can't make money doing it. Right? And so that's probably one of the 4 most important things. If you're investing capital into a solution like this, you've got to be able to see the return. And the return can't just be at the benefit of FIS. It can't just be at the benefit of the Fed. It's got to be at the benefit of the end user, whether that's a bank, it's a company, it's an individual, et cetera. And so a lot of work and argument has gone into that. There's no solution that comes without disagreement, and so we have a lot of fun discussions. I very much encourage you, if you're not a part of the task force, to join. There's some fun discussions that happen in there too, and it can be getting 300 people to all agree on something is probably the most fun you'll ever have, and so it's worth doing. On the international connectivity implications, one of the big problems that we see in the market right now is outbound remittance, right? People moving money from one country to another in real time, building reciprocal networks for that, and communication is a big initiative. Again, what this entire initiative does for us, the faster payments movement, is allow us to see each of those different things as they might mature ahead of or behind the time frame that we've laid out in participation with the Fed. We get to consider kind of all of those, different aspects and use points. And so we're solving some of the problems now. You don't have the room for error that you used to have in the financial space, right? We already have a bar of accepted fraud losses in just about every use case. So you can't threaten that, or as you roll out your product, if it threatens that, it's going to immediately get destroyed, and then when it gets destroyed, you're going to have trouble getting it back up to the front of the line. So security, obviously at the top there is the biggest issue, making sure that fraud is managed well, that identity protection, all of those type of things. Some of the legislation coming out in the UK, the PSD2 laws, a great example of factoring that stuff into our use cases, and really thinking about how is that going to translate to the US, how is it going to move to India, South America. Those are all big questions for us. So I would say FIS is challenging all 5 of these in parallel, right? They're not dominoes. So as we work to set up this infrastructure and get ubiquity, you see reciprocal networks there. No one has absolute access. No one can access every account in the system. So we partner with the clearinghouse. There'll be other partnerships that are announced in the market. Those partnerships are going to be necessary the same way, if any of you remember how the ATM networks came up, same way the ACH system actually in its inception was born. Those are going to happen. So the reciprocal networks and reciprocal agreements are going to be how we route all those transactions. And the rest of it, from a technology perspective, most of which exists today. In some form or another, every part of payments technology exists today, the ability to settle funds, etc. It's integrations, it's development, it's rule setting, it's fraud rules and risk. And so it's a fun experience to go through the capital and leverage the assets you have and bring them to bear in an all-inclusive solution. So it's been a lot of fun. Probably the one that we get the most disagreement and discussion on is the disruption opportunities, right? So obviously things are being handled today, right? We'd love to say that we're disrupting cash, right? Everybody wants to tackle the cash. Still, I think 85% of transactions in the world are done in cash, and only 15% are represented. A lot of those dollars that I'm referencing are handled in smaller countries or third world countries where availability to electronic payments and banking information is very limited, i.e. India, South America, Africa, all good examples where a huge investment in any type of financial structure would lead to the need for these type of solutions. What you're disrupting domestically, right, if you're talking about the States, is you're disrupting the existing, channels that are there. A lot of discussion about whether it would disrupt card networks or not. There's, we could probably spend 2 days arguing about whether it will, whether it won't. At the end state, the same question exists if you go backwards. What's in it for the consumer? What's in it for the user? Is the business going to benefit from this somehow materially, right? So getting people to save money is not as exciting as getting people to make money. So what we find a lot of times is we bring solutions and we talk to the banks and talk to the different businesses about real-time payments. They say, great, you're going to save me X. If I spent the same amount of time over here, I could make Y, and that's a problem. So getting the ROI figured out is the biggest challenge in the faster payment space, right? ACH and the money movement is something we're kind of accustomed to. Getting people off of that is going to require significant advantage. And so as we work through those 30 use cases, it's a pretty standard process. We prioritize them based on ROI, based on scale in the market, what we think we can do to free up funds, and then you just kind of go down the list, ticking one at a time to make those things happen. We've had a great experience with the Fed. We've got a number of people from our network group and our payments group all participating, and internally we have our own committee that's discussing these things and deciding how much to invest in each of those spaces, what assets are really leverageable, where we need partnerships versus where we're able to build or develop on our own. And so a lot of exciting things have happened over the last year, most of which I think you hear and see announcements in the market. I would say about 50% of what I've seen in the market are slight misrepresentations to faster payments, right? There's a lot of people talking about real-time messaging. Real-time messaging is not the same as faster payments. So as you go through that document, if you go to the website, I would encourage reading it. Our definition aligns with the Fed's definition of what a faster payment is. It has to cross off certain things. You can make a real-time messaging, that's not a problem. It doesn't necessarily mean the funds are moving. The funds moving isn't the only answer. They have to settle, right? So the ideal scenario for us is to get to the place where the funds have moved in real time between core systems, between core banking accounts, whether that's inside a single financial entity or across multiple financial entities. And so when I see announcements, I think, wow, they've jumped way ahead of the entire market, and then you dig in and you find out they're just sending messaging. That's exciting that they're doing that, but it's not actually settling the funds, right? They're still waiting in some type of batch process. Certainly not the end state that we're looking for. Better, iterative improvement is always the way, right? We can't change the entire financial system in a day. There's too many unknown ramifications there. But again, back to the exciting time. So we have a pretty strong workforce focused on this, a lot of partnership, a lot of consultants, a lot of outside influence, right? We don't want to, the worst logic you can have is closed door logic, right? Sit in a room long enough, you'll come up with a really bad idea. So getting more people in and more interaction, that's been one of the best parts of the Fed participation. And then obviously there's a point in time where you say, okay, now we're ready to do something. How do we differentiate ourselves from the market? What is the use case solution that we're going to offer that brings the benefit to the financial institution? If we do it the same as everybody else, you have an instantly commoditized market. Nobody wants that. And so, well, nobody in my job wants that. So there's a lot going on right now, and I think you could probably argue that the biggest discussion is around the disruption, around what industries are going to get displaced by faster payments. I think we'd all be surprised to say there's a lot of room in the faster payment space not to displace industry with some of the use cases and just to create efficiency. And then obviously with a much larger investment going after displacements there. I've had a hard time personally finding the money in disrupting large existing infrastructures today because the benefit is, kind of in the single-digit IRR. And if you don't get to 40 to 50 to 60% IRR, there's just better things to work on. And so when we go down those use cases and we see things that, hey, we can create a 78% return on investment and a benefit for the client, that's going to come first. It doesn't matter how cool it would be to disrupt this or how scalable it would be to do that. If you can solve the problem of moving money from the U.S. to Mexico in real time and solve the distribution channel problem that they have for moving what is equivalent of billions of dollars a day in U.S.-based citizens transferring money to family, friends, businesses, et cetera, internationally, if you can solve those problems, there's a lot of money in it, there's a lot of return and a lot of margin. Those are the things you want to focus on. And that's not disruption, right? That's creating efficiency, which is what we want to focus on. So.